Hello, I am award-winning crime fiction author T.G. Campbell, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new project.
If you are a fan of the Victorian crime fiction series The Bow Street Society,
which you probably are, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this trailer,
then we have an exciting announcement for you.
On Saturday, the 10th of July this year, we are launching the official Bow Street Society podcast. It will be available through many of the popular podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Is it going to be on BBC Sounds?
No.
TuneIn Radio?
Shh! On the podcast, we will give you news updates, give you background on the real world that the Society operated in, as well as insight into the characters and stories in the series, and it will be released every other month.
Also, in the first episode, we will be exclusively announcing the title of the forthcoming 5th book in the series, The Case of...
You just said it.
Did I?
Yes.
I just said The Case of...
You just said it again.
Oops. I'll tell the powers that be that I used a naughty word. They'll soon get rid of it for us.
So, join Richard and myself by subscribing to the podcast wherever you found this trailer.
Thank you, and see you on the 10th of July.
You're going to be trouble, aren't you?
There we go. I would very much like to introduce Tani Campbell. Hello, Tani.
Hello.
Hello. Tani is the writer of the Bow Street Society series of books. The Bow Street Society podcast launches today. So tell us a little bit about it.
So, as you say, the podcast is to help sort of introduce people to the books. It also explores the world of 1896 London, so the reality of that world, so to do with policing, true crime, society and technology, through interviews, and also going back to the books, there's also interviews with characters as well, directly through the characters from the books as well.
Excellent. So, for those who haven't read the books, they are murder mysteries set in, well, initially the year 1896. What would you say makes them unique compared to most crime fiction?
Well, because most crime fiction has one detective, or they might have a sidekick with that detective, and that's the only sort of detective you have throughout the series. If you do have a group of detectives, it tends to be the same, like 3 or 4 people. But with my books, it's different because depending on what case they get asked to investigate, depends on who gets called in. So the combination of detectives who are assigned to a case changes with each mystery. So you never always have the same group of detectives investigating every single case.
And so you've got a group of characters. How did you come up with them? Who came first?
So Miss Trent came first. So she is the clerk of the society, and she's the only one who officially who knows who all the members are. So that's for safety reasons. And so she is the one that will sort of interview new members. She's also the one who listens to people's cases who come into society and ask them to investigate. And she will also do sort of the management of the members and facilitate meetings. So she came first because she's a very pivotal character, obviously because she needs to basically run the show. So she doesn't actually investigate crimes herself, but she will determine based upon the details of the case which members have the skills which she deems necessary to be able to solve that case. So yeah, Elizabeth Trent was the first one that came along as in terms of creation.
So you've got a group of how many roughly are there in the society that we are aware of?
There's about 15, I think, at the moment, roughly.
Wow! And have we seen all of them in the first 4 or 5 books?
Or those 15?
Yeah.
Probably no, because there's one that he appears just in the short story. Can't remember his name for life me there, but he's the jeweler.
Yeah. So
he only appears in one short story. That's the case of Desperate Deed. But he will eventually appear in one of the books. But there is obviously other members who I've yet to introduce, who I do intend to introduce in the next few books as well.
So who was your inspiration? Why do you like crime fiction so much, and who inspired you to write your own?
I always loved Agatha Christie, but I mean, when I was growing up, my mum and me, my sisters and brothers, used to always watch sort of crime dramas on TV. So I grew up watching like Poirot, Diane Pascoe, Taggart, The Bill, and
Miss Marple.
The Bill.
The Bill. We won't mention The Bill. What about Miss Marple? That was the only one I remember watching as a kid.
I enjoyed Miss Marple because when I was younger, I used to read sort of point and horror and everything. Once you got past that, once you read all those in the library, my mum always sort of said, "Oh, why don't you try Agatha Christie?" So then we used to read Agatha Christie books. But personally, I always wanted to join the police. That was something that I really, really wanted to do. But unfortunately, due to my eyesight, that was never an option open to me. So I thought, well, the next best thing is to write about the police. Well, if I can't join them, I might as well write about them. So I initially, the first one I ever wrote in terms of crime fiction was a very bad screenplay called The Sunsdale Murders, which is kind of a cross between The Bill and Midsomer Murders. That I've definitely never seen the light of day. But then in terms of a book, the first one I wrote was a story called Death of a Kindred, which was for my friend's 16th birthday.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that your first attempt was a screenplay. That's absolutely fascinating.
So bad.
I think probably my first writing attempt was actually a screenplay. That's really weird. Well, it wasn't a screenplay. It was actually a radio drama. So when I was at school, they made available as a book the complete scripts of the radio version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I thought it'd be quite good fun to get a load of mates to do it. And we recorded the 12 episodes. And it was all good fun, and nobody wanted it to stop. So a friend and I decided to write a 90-minute special, and we wrote it, and it was full of terrible, terrible jokes. Some of them maybe a bit Douglas Adamsy, but and then weirdly, when I was at college, I lent it to a friend. Never got it back. I really wish I still had it because it was probably crap. But there were some good bits and pieces in there. Oh, that's absolutely fascinating. Oh, so you would never show that to anyone?
No.
There was nothing unequivocal about that, was there? There was absolutely not.
Never got to see the light of day.
So you've got your groups of characters, which means each mystery has potentially a different set of characters. So who are your core characters? Who are the ones that, I'll say outside Miss Trent's, who are likely, barring accidents, to appear in most of the books?
So there's the core characters who have the skills that generally are needed in most books. So you have Mr. Sam Snyder, who is their driver, but also because he is a veteran hansom cab driver, he has a very detailed knowledge of the streets and the transport networks and the railways, the omnibuses, the trams, because there were still trams at this point in London. As if you need to know how to get somewhere, then he's a man to ask. You also have Miss Georgina Dexter, who is an artist. She also has a bit of an interest in photography, but she's really useful because if somebody's seen somebody seen a crime, she can sit down and actually take the description and do a sketch from that witness. So she's always tends to be in the mysteries. And Mr. Joseph Maxwell, who was an apprentice journalist, now a full journalist at the Gaslight Gazette. He tends to be in it because, being a journalist, he is quite good at asking questions, and he can look back in the archives of the newspaper to see if there's any sort of bearing on past cases as well. So they tend to be the main core characters that tend, at the moment, who tend to be in every case other than Miss Trent.
Now, you've published 4 books. You've written a 5th, which is, for those of you who want to know all about it, the title is being exclusively revealed on the Bow Street Society podcast, which is available for download in 23 minutes' time. It's a really good title. Again, I can't give away what it is, but as I think I've said to you before, it's... Normally a title gives you an idea of what's happening in the story, but this particular one will make somebody who's read the rest of the books go, oh my. Was that deliberate or?
Yes. It was always going to it was always going to be that title. Because the actual mystery itself sort of took different sort of variations in my mind leading up to this. Basically, I can say this without sort of giving away too much. This mystery is a combination of things that happened in the first 4 books. So as I was going through those first 4 books, I had various sort of scenarios in my mind what this book would actually look like, but it was always going to be that title.
Excellent. Well, I'm lucky enough to be one of your beta readers, so I started reading it late last night, so I've only read sort of the first, not even all of the prologue yet, because I'm taking my time and reading it through thoroughly. So what's your process when you write something? Obviously you have the idea. How do you actually go about doing the writing?
So obviously with a series, you've got sort of the foundations there ready for the characters, but what I tend to do is you will start the mystery. So I will tend to start with the victim in the mystery, because the victim is actually the one at the centre of everything. Then I normally start with that sense. I start with the method of murder. So I think, well, what haven't I done yet? So sort of look at what I've done previously and then decide what I want to do next, and then build up that victim around that method of murder, because obviously normally links to do with their occupation or their domestic circumstances, and then you decide who the murderer is, linked to that person, and then you go out from there around the suspects. Generally, rule of thumb is that there's 6 suspects. The smaller the group of suspects, the more detail you have to go into in their background and more investigation. So it depends really how deep you want to go into, and then from there you then sort of build up the plot and the mystery based loosely upon those elements. And then because mine is set in 1896, I then need to do research, see what is this actually viable in that era, and see. And then once you do that, you then find out, well, could they actually then investigate this type of murder at that time? Did they have technology to be able to check if it was a poison? Could they detect that? How would they detect that? And then from there, I then decide, well, which members would then investigate, and then how would those members use their skills to solve the crime? Because if they can't use their skills to solve the crime, then it's a bit pointless them being there. So it needs to be able to sort of link into all of that. And then once that's generally sort of just done on Word documents, sort of writing notes, just sort of free flow thoughts really. So while I'm writing that, I'll just literally ask her questions while I'm typing that up, just to help me sort of get through those sort of like different sort of elements and sort of decide to form the plot itself. And then I will then go on to, I've got Writers Cafe storyline program. It's a virtual like online like PC program. It's got a virtual notes board on there. So then I always have sort of the core plot lines that run throughout the series. So each line on the notice board is a different plot line. So I'll have like the mystery at the top, then you've got like the romance, and you've got conspiracy, and you've got some other elements which I'm not going to say because they're coming in the new book. And then each line has a card on each column, which is a card represents an event. So I plan the whole mystery in the card format, and it generates a report. And then once I've done that, there's then more research again to make sure that what I've done would be able to do back in that era. And then finally go into the actual writing of it.
And how long did it take? Pardon me. How long did it take you to write the one you've just finished? I think you only finished it a week ago or so.
Yeah. Well, I planned it back in 2019. I obviously wanted to start writing it in 2020, but because of certain things that happened in it, I wanted to do research down at the Metropolitan Police Historic Service collection. But they were moving, so I couldn't go down there for that reason. But then also the pandemic happened, so I then couldn't go again to do that research. And eventually I had to sort of just rely on the research I already had, because they're still just in the process of moving still at the moment. So basically, in terms of writing it, I think it was about 6-7 months, I think, roughly. Because I'd already done the planning. Once you've done the planning, the actual writing of it is easier because you just follow the plot plan. Although sometimes, this one I had to basically keep sort of rejigging the plot plan around because things would make more sense in different orders. And also depending on what characters say and do, you've then got to sort of reorganise as well. I
was going to specifically ask that about characters not doing the things you quite want them to do and the impact it has on the narrative. I remember you telling me that this happened in book 1, didn't it?
Yeah, with Miss Georgina Dexter and Mr. Joseph Maxwell. They're meant to just be associates, and they got in a carriage together, and she touched his hand, and he was like, oh. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's going to be a romance now. So that's how that literally started out, basically. I don't intend to sort of make an effort to include romance. Romance is not really sort of my thing, but that in that situation, it was opposite. Those two characters liked each other, and therefore there was nothing I could do about it, basically.
You've got a really good mixture of characters. So as well as the Bow Street Society characters, you've got at least 4 important characters from the police force, probably more if you start incorporating some of the sergeants and constables and stuff. But you've got 4 key police characters. Who's your favourite character at the moment that you write for?
Our favourite character at the moment that I write for is probably Detective Inspector John Conway, purely because he is such a multi-layered character. He, in one hand, he embodies that whole ethos of being a policeman, being a policeman in your life. It's literally everything that he is connected to being a policeman. But at the same time, he's also supporting the Bow-Street Society, which is basically working in effect against the police. So he's my most favourite character to write because of that, but also he's also the most difficult character to write for because sometimes he's not very forthcoming in terms of telling me his thoughts. So you have to sort of really get into sort of his mindset and actually just you really sort of analyse why is he doing what he's doing, because it's not always obvious.
One of the strengths of your books is the amount of description that you put into it. And obviously this is necessary because in a book set in the modern day, people will know what things look like and you don't really need that level of description, whereas in yours, you absolutely do. I don't know what a 1896 house or parlour looks like. I kind of possibly have a rough idea in my head, but I don't know. And I think one of my favourite descriptions in all of the books so far, and it was so simple, I think it was in book 3, was just the description of Conway's house, because it unconsciously told you so much about him, his relationship with his job. How much research did you have to do to make that relatively small sequence work?
Well, what I always do when I try to decide where I'm going to place a character, where they live, I always first of all look on Booth's property map to see where that class of person would live, because it's colour coded in terms of they actually literally went round. The council literally went around at the time and was in the interview people who lived in houses, and that's how they determined what social class they were. And so obviously you look at geographically like where his work would be, what like practically how would he get there, and then once you've done that, then I go on to so I've identified the street, and then I then go on to the London Picture Archive, which has some brilliant pictures of streets back like in just turn of the century, if not earlier. So I then look at the houses and then all that, would that be kind of house that he would live in? Yeah, okay, we'll do that. And then from there, I would then, well, in his particular case, I had to decide, would he have an open fire with a grate or would he have a stove? Because basically with a stove, you see those old-fashioned like cast iron sort of stoves with the doors and everything. That's very difficult to sort of keep going. So would he have the time to do that? And it took me so long to actually decide, because technically he could afford a stove, but actually, practically, because he's always out, would he even have a need for one? He's not married, he lives on his own. His house is literally just somewhere that he sleeps. It's just somewhere that he keeps his stuff there as much as it is. But I got one book that literally is just about stoves and grates. And so I used that to determine what kind of setup he would for his cooking. But it's funny because some of my people have read the books. I've said that particular description when we initially go in his house is quite depressing because the parlour's dark, it's obviously not been used. He's there on his own, and it's obviously quite. Did say a lot about his character, but also what I enjoyed with that book is that then later on, Miss Trent and his Conway's senior officer then go to his house, and he's very much like all got tidy up, and he's made the effort to make it look all nice and everything. So at the same time, even though it is just something he seeks, when he has guests, he's quite proud of it as well.
I mean, the first thing I thought when I was first introduced to the first book, I sat there reading it. I've got an inspector called Conway. Why does that ring a bell? So I as I think anybody who reads books does, you kind of take more from it maybe than the author intended. So I have to say, I am obsessed with the fact that John Conway is somehow related to Derek Conway, who was chief inspector at Sunhill Police Station until he died in 2002. Obviously, that's a complete coincidence. That wasn't something you did on purpose.
It was a complete coincidence. Yeah.
It was, but I love it. I'm still I'm reading the books, hoping that one day he'll have a kid or something. Just because no, I know, such a shame.
The only way he could ever have a kid is if he had some kind of liaison like years ago, which he then didn't know there was a child involved. Because I think he's the kind of person that if he knew that he'd got a woman pregnant, he would marry her.
Right.
He wouldn't let her be like, living in shame, basically. He would have made sure that she was made an honest woman of and looked after. So it'd only be if she didn't tell him.
Cool. Who's your favourite character out of the actual society?
I think that's probably Mr. Percy Locke, the illusionist, because he is so arrogant yet at the same time so vulnerable. Because he makes out that he is a gentleman, so he's quite wealthy. He's the owner of the Paladin Palladium. He has where he performs, and so he's quite well off. But at the same time, he has a lot of demons, and he's actually addicted to heroin. So he's got a lot of things he has to deal with. But the fact as well that he's also a gentleman thief, and he's got knowledge about locks, and so he's quite useful when they need to search a place without somebody knowing. But yeah, I think again he's quite a complex character, and I just quite enjoy. And also, he's one of those characters that you can quite enjoy doing. Like when somebody's not being very nice in the book, they can make quite a witty remark, and that's quite funny sometimes as well.
I really like him. I'm going to tell you who my favourite is. We've already had this conversation, so you already know. But it is the absolutely disgusting. He's also a Percy, actually. Percy Weeks, the Canadian pathologist.
It's Percival.
Sorry?
Don't ever call Dr. Percy Weeks Percival. That's no. Okay. He's Percy.
He's Percy. However, the character is an absolute delight. I mean, he's completely disgusting. The way he talks to people shows absolutely no consideration. The things he does. Now, we had a discussion about this before, and you said you think that's more of a product of his time than being a quirk of his. But like one of the bits that amused me and disgusted me the most was there was a bit where he's at a pub and he's wiping blood off his hands because he hadn't got around to cleaning up himself.
He gives the money to the barmaid, and he's got blood in his hands. He's like, "I'm a doctor," and she's like, "Oh." Doesn't make it better, but also the fact that he, which always discussed the character in the book, is that whenever he refers to a body, he doesn't refer to it as a body, he refers to it as meat. Which everybody's like, what do you mean meat?
yes, I had picked up on that. But there's a definite, there is a bit more of a history hinted at. I won't say too much because I don't want to spoil things, but something unexpected. Well, an unexpected character turns up in the third book, which is the case of the spectral shot. I remembered. Yeah. I'm terrible with the names. In my head, they're books 1 to 4, which is quite a good thing because I don't want to accidentally name book 5. I do love Dr. Weeks. And I really like the series because, as I've said to you on many occasions, it's not a genre that I like. It's not a genre that I usually enjoy. And for me, the reason I enjoy yours is it's the characters. They are all unique. They're all interesting. They've all got quirks and they've all got secrets. I mean, one of the things that dangled at the end of book 4, which I'm hoping, I don't know if it will be followed up in book 5, but you've got this past associate of Miss Trent's that the police now know about. And I was kind of expecting a confrontation in book 4 and it didn't happen. So there's that plot thread to look forward to in book 5. I don't know if it will be picked up, but I'm guessing that character may appear.
Which past associate are you talking about?
I'm thinking specifically, I don't know if she is a past associate, but Polly.
The barmaid.
Yeah. Is it Polly?
Polly, yeah. So she technically is a member of the society. They just necessarily get called in to cases. But yeah, so she is, as shown in book 2, she is a past lover of Miss Trent.
Do you know what? Because when she said, I'm a member in book 4, I thought she was just deliberately, I'd forgotten she was a member. I thought that she was deliberately feeding Lee a line there just to put... that's interesting.
Book 2, Dr. Weeks is questioning one of the witnesses and then Polly walks in and Miss Trent's trying to stop her because obviously Polly is currently involved with Dr. Weeks.
Yes.
But this barmaid's got nothing to do but whatsoever, and he's a drunk. But yeah, so obviously, basically, I think Miss Trent was hoping that there could be something with Polly, but basically Polly said that she'd fallen in love with Dr. Weeks. So at the moment, that is not going anywhere.
I mean, how big a deal would it have been in Victoria if the police uncover that they were in a relationship and decide to spread it around, maybe let the local newspaper, the Gaslight Gazette know?
It was illegal, first of all, she'd get arrested.
It was illegal. Was it illegal for women? My understanding was that it was only illegal for men. And this is probably something I've heard completely wrongly.
What I've read is mostly men that had the cases against, but I think women was more sneaky, I think.
Because I thought I'd read that Queen Victoria didn't believe that lesbians existed, therefore they weren't covered by any law. But that could be something I've read that's completely wrong.
But to be honest, it's one of those things that unless they literally caught them in the act, it would be difficult to prove.
True.
So it's, it would literally be sort of, or they had like a love letter or something physical that actually, I think, I haven't looked that much into it, but what I've read, it tends to be people who've been caught literally in the act of doing it that's been arrested. Right.
I mean, it's very interesting because again, you've got quite a few characters with different sexualities, which is quite interesting. So you've got Elliot, the solicitor, who's not, I wouldn't say openly gay, but then you've also got Inspector.
Elliot he presses his sexuality.
Yeah, and then you've got Inspector Lee. You see, that's a very interesting dynamic there because you've set that up for something to happen in the future. And I don't necessarily mean something between them, but I'm half expecting Inspector Lee to be in a position to hold it against Elliot and maybe force Elliot to do something that maybe betrays the society. I don't know. There's definitely... I'm interested to see where that plays out.
I think that was Lee's intention. But again, the problem with that situation is, which Lee also professes his sexuality. So it's difficult for them to even do anything because they're both like, unless they actually ask each other, or, do you like men? It's obviously because Lee being an inspector, it's a big no-no as well. But so, because there was originally going to be between them two, was going to be a bit of a liaison between them two, but then obviously the way I wrote the characters, it wouldn't have worked, basically, because the way they see their own sexuality and the way that they live their lives, it wouldn't necessarily work. But yeah, I can see what you mean. Yeah, Lee's got that up his sleeve that he could actually use that against him.
Well, there's another 5 books. So how far ahead do you plan? Obviously, you've just finished your draft of book 5. You've got beta readers looking at it now. It's hopefully coming out in September. Do you know what happens in book 6 already?
For the main plotline that goes through the whole series, I know what happens right up until book 9.
Interesting.
So I've planned that up until book 9, yeah. And so there's a couple of plot lines that link off of that, which again, they're all planned up to book 9. Because I did all that between books 4 and 5, so I knew what would need to happen in book 5. Because book 5 is very much a bridge book in between the two halves of the series. So basically, from this point onwards, it's going to vamp up in terms of the drama and the intrigue.
I really like, as well as obviously the actual individual mysteries, I really do like the ongoing story. I sat there, so I only read, I think, the first scene, the first 6 pages of, I nearly said the name then, book 5.
Yeah.
It'll be revealed in 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, guys, the podcast is released. The first episode of the podcast, at some point during which Tani reveals the name of the 5th book. Well, as we're 3 minutes away from that, tell me a little bit about the podcast and why we're doing it. Because it is us, isn't it? So I am the co-presenter.
Yes, as I say, we prepared to mention that, anyone. That Richard is my lovely co-host. He's been a massive help doing the podcast. He's obviously done podcasts in the past, and I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't want to do a podcast on my own because I think having 2 hosts on podcasts works so much better. And Richard's just so good at sort of being a presenter and sort of, that sort of very charismatic that it just really, I think, lifts the podcast rather than just me being on my own. So thank you very much for all your help. It's been amazing. But yeah, so it's very much a magazine format. It has got, obviously, it explores the history of Bow Street, explores the history of police. And so in the first episode, we do have an interview with the ladies of the new museum in Bow Street, the Bow Street Police Museum. We also have a segment which Richard recorded to do with the history of Bow Street itself, which is very interesting. We have an interview with Miss Trent. So that's my favourite segment of the podcast, actually giving the readers and listeners a chance to actually put their correct questions directly to the characters from the series. So rather than me just sitting there saying, it's Miss Trent, this is her name, this is where she was born, you actually have that direct connection with the books. So if you have a favourite character who you are dying to ask a particular question of, then you can actually ask them and hear them reply. We have voice actors Sabrina Paul, Phil Rowe and Jaden Brannan voicing those characters. And we also place interviews in their natural environment. So if Miss Trent, it will be in the British Society parlour. And basically, yeah, so the podcast will be every other month. So it'll obviously be this month, then it'll be September, the next one. They're about like 50 minutes long, aren't they? But even though it has got all the sort of that history, we have got a bit tongue in cheek as well. So there's quite a bit of humour in there as well. And I know that Richard loves one of the things that Phil sent us, which is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, just to break up the each segment, because at one point we didn't know if we were going to have to carry adverts and stuff. So I wanted to have a way of breaking up each bit, so that if an advert had to go in, there'd be a way of telling you were back into the podcast. And luckily we found a way of doing it without advertising, I think. I'm guessing if you listen to it on Spotify and you're not a subscriber, it probably will insert adverts, because I can't imagine there'd be 50 minutes. Anyway, let me just have a look at what the time is, because we're kind of relying on this happening. So right, so in 10 seconds time, the podcast will be live. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do you think it works? I shall now find out. If not, I can release it manually. But what I'm going to do is go to iTunes and go to the podcast library and go to the individual shows, Bow Street Society podcast, refresh. Right, I'm going to release it manually. Hang on. Let me just go into Anchor and see if it may have done. It may just take iTunes a moment to... No, it's there. According to... excellent stuff. So, so it is out. It's just been released on Anchor, which means it should very soon be available on all the other...
Listen. Yes, now.
Please do listen.
Well, not now. Wait till you finish talking, then go listen to it.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure how I update. Hang on. Episode 1 trailer. Well, it will be on iTunes soon. It's definitely been released. I've just checked on...
The next 5 minutes, isn't it? By the time to give it a chance to actually sort of activate.
Yeah, let me just have a look on Spotify as well. See if it's see what Spotify's doing. Which is actually owned by Anchor, so it's much more likely to be...
on there. It was there on first, wasn't it? Before it was there pretty quickly when we did the trailer.
Oh, it says see all episodes, and it's still only got the one. Oh well, it'll be. It has been released by Anchor, so it should start turning up soon. Well, that was fun. I'll keep an eye on it. No, so the podcast was good fun to do. We're quite far ahead, aren't we? So
yes.
Over half of show 2 is recorded, and we've got interviews beyond that as well.
Including Dr. Weeks, which I think you're probably very looking forward to.
I am looking forward to the Dr. Weeks interview. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. There's loads of things in it. One of the things you didn't do when you mentioned the museum was hold up your mug again.
Oh yeah, sorry, I always do that. Yeah, museum cup. I actually got this cup before they even started selling them, because I voted them, and I included it on Mug May on my social media.
Oh so yes, explain that, because you referred
one of the first mugs they sold.
That's cool. So the museum looks very, very interesting. The what do you call it? When we interview them, one of the actual people is where? When we interviewed them?
In one of the police cells.
Yeah. So we actually one of the people we interviewed was actually one of the actual cells yeah. So that was absolutely fascinating. I keep checking my...
The museum is housed in the building was the original building that housed the magistrates court and the police station. So in the books where Inspector Wolf is based, he's based in E Division's station in Bow Street. Yeah. So if you were going to Bow Street now, you could actually see the building where it's pictured in the books. Because the building itself is now a hotel, but the museum's found the side in what was the police custody cells.
That is incredible. I mean, I'm really looking forward to at some point going to see it. They also do walking tours. As I think we said in the podcast, there's a tour called Of Mollies and Men, which was I think deliberately launched in Pride Month, but it was all about the link between the LGBT community of the time. Obviously, they weren't called that then.
Yeah, because I'm really interested to actually go on that. Obviously, based, like I say, because some characters are like LGBTQ. I think it would be good to actually go on that more just to get a bit more background information.
Yeah, I mean, I
never find out everything because always, keep getting as much information you can, with these sort of things.
And the good news is that particular walk has been extended. So the sad thing was we thought it was over and done with when we recorded the interview. But since then, we do mention this in the podcast, they have launched more walking tour dates for, I think, up to and including November. But go to their website, bowstreetpolicemuseum.org.uk. And they've put a lot of work and a lot of time, and they've got some very interesting stuff there. So I'd say that's the interview with them is the backbone of the show. For some reason, it hasn't yet turned up on some of the other apps. It's definitely out there. The actual, if you go to anchor.fm and look for the Bow Street Society podcast, which is who hosts it for us, episode 1 has been released. So 3 minutes ago, according to this. So at some point today, I'll keep looking out on the other bits and pieces. But at some point today, we will actually have... it will be out there.
Because if you send me the links for those different platforms, I will put those links on my website on the page, so people can then click on those links and then go straight to the podcast.
Cool.
From the website, which would be good.
Excellent stuff. Okay. Is there anything else you think I should ask you before we kind of wrap this up? Well, no, you want to ask me some questions, don't you? Before
ask you questions, yeah.
Okay, all right. Is there anything else you think I should ask you before you grill me?
I think you're covered, I think. But are you sitting comfortably? Okay,
no, not at all.
So obviously, as you say, I will be intending to put this on my YouTube channel. So just for those people who will watch this on my YouTube channel, I might not have sort of come across your work before, can you please just start by introducing yourself and also telling us what project you're currently working on?
Okay, my name is Richard Boxshall. I'm an unpublished author. I haven't published anything at all really yet. The current project I'm working on has had many titles. It started off as The Artist and is currently called Still Life, which I think is a really good title for it, but it isn't a very original book title. There's already been a book published in the last year by, that Scottish author, I can't remember her name, but there's already been a book called Still Life published. So whether that will be the final title or not, I don't know. My stuff starts in the real world and then gets a bit odd. So the basic premise of the story, it's about an immortal artist who kidnaps women and traps them, well, not just women, but mainly women, and traps them in his artwork. So they effectively disappear off the face of the earth. And it's the story about how after nearly 2,000 years of doing this, he gets caught. So that's basically what it's about.
You've also got another book that you just wrapping up at the moment, haven't you, as well, that you've been doing on your stream?
Yes. So the one that I've nearly finished. I think it is finished. I'm giving it one final read through to make sure. Is called the English Hikomori, and I wrote this before anything happened in terms of a pandemic. But it's all about somebody who isolates himself because of mental health problems, and it's not a happy story. Yeah, and it's all about someone. It's basically about someone working up to suicide, so it's incredibly cheerful.
Yeah, but it's more multi-layered than that, because I have actually read the book and it is really, really good. I'm very impressed by the book, and I think you're a fantastic author. Not that you always think that yourself, but I do think you are.
Okay.
And there's much more to it than that. And I think it's one of those books that stay with you long after you finish reading it. And the characters, and especially the character of Freddie, is really well drawn. And so even though what his situation is going through is very multi-layered, and you definitely go on that journey with him. And it's definitely when it gets released, I'll definitely recommend people to go and buy it, because it's a fantastic read.
Oh, thank you very much. As I say, I think it's I think it has I think it'll have a niche audience if it was ever released, because I've sent it to quite a few people, and my general thoughts are blokes find it too much. So every single male reader has either not liked it or not finished it because it was too depressing. And it is quite heavy in places. It really is. I was getting a lot of stuff out of my system when I wrote it.
If remember, it will be sort of obviously releasing to a global audience, so there will be people out there who will really. I think the people will really connect with the character of Freddie and really sort of take to him and really become involved with the story, because you definitely get the impression that it's written for somebody who's been there. It's not somebody who's just trying to write about depression based upon what they've read on like websites and in books.
No, that's fair.
Yeah. So, but that makes such a difference, though. When if you are somebody who has had depression and has been through that yourself, it makes such a difference to be able to read from a point of view of somebody who's been in that similar situation, because then you feel like that connection and you feel like vindicated to a certain degree, I think, because I'm not the only one.
No.
And through fiction, I think you definitely will help a lot of people with that book when you release it.
I mean, I think for me, it was definitely, I didn't really write it to show to other people. I wrote it to get a lot of stuff out of my system. I mean, I'm not the character in the book or anything like that, and I was never suicidal, but I was very, very unwell at a certain point, and really that was just a way of getting a lot of the negativity in my head onto paper and help me kind of rationalize it and understand it. And it was, as I said, really, really cathartic process, because you read it and you think, my God, what kind of nutcase thinks that? Oh, that's right, I thought that. So there was definitely an element of therapy in getting it out. But then, like you say, it isn't terrible. I think there are some positive points in it, and hopefully at some point some other people, other than close friends and family, will get an opportunity to read it. We'll see. I am this close to finishing it, though. I'm literally giving it one final read through just to make sure there's nothing I want to change, which I don't think there will be. And then I'm going to literally close the cover on it, and that'll be that.
Yeah, so you also mentioned earlier on that you'd done some sort of writing for screen, like a podcast, like this Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the script for you and your friends.
Yeah.
And obviously, you said you just explained why you did English Hikomori. But was there any other reason why you decided to go into writing beyond that? Was it just that to sort of therapeutic process?
No, I should have done it a long, long time ago. So I've always enjoyed it. I always got wonderful feedback from teachers at school about stuff that I wrote, and unfortunately, when your brain and mind is in a certain place, it kind of dries up creatively. And I was a manager at a well-known retail outlet that sells a lot of value things. Anyway, I was a manager for them. That was my job, and it was the reason. It was absolutely the culture of the company at the time was absolutely the reason behind my depression. And what I found was I had no creative ability when I was depressed. It kind of it's like it's erased from you, and it took a long time to come back. So I left that job in 2014. I started writing songs again in about 2016, which was a sign to me that it was going the right way. And I'd had this idea for the English Hikomori and really wanted to do something with it, but never really got round to it. And then I listened to podcasts about writing and stuff like that, and was aware of NaNoWriMo, and I've been aware of it for like 10 plus years. There's a writer called Mer Lafferty, who I think is published now, but when she started, she was literally an unpublished author hoping to get published. And the podcast was called I Should Be Writing, and it was all about her writing and what she did and the processes she went through, and interviewing because she was quite a good podcaster. She managed to get published authors on. And she used NaNoWriMo as a way of starting. So I kind of decided in November 2018 to actually take part in NaNoWriMo. And one of the things I hadn't really realised was the existence of the local groups. Yeah. So I started halfway through. I didn't even start on the 1st of November. I kind of thought about it halfway through the month and thought, well, it's not over yet. I won't do the 50,000 words, but I'll give it a go. So, excuse me. Yeah, I went along to the one of my local writing groups, and found the atmosphere quite conducive and encouraging. Obviously, that's how I know you. Yeah. And a few other people. Yeah. What was the question?
I still remember you come to that first meeting because it was me, you, and Jeff. I think were there, and me and Jeff were telling you about our sort of writing projects. I remember you sort of wanted to know more about that really, rather than sort of what you were sort of working at the time.
Yeah.
But yes, it was more. The question was sort of, how did you, why did you continue writing, and how did you get into writing?
So as I said, I've always wanted to, and I should have done it a long time ago. And I enjoy it. I find it in places cathartic. I enjoy thinking up stories, and one of my favourite bits in the writing process is where something unexpected happens.
Yeah.
And one of the projects of mine that I haven't mentioned because it's a little bit big and I haven't finished yet, it's called Empress of the Trees, and it's another really cheerful story, because I do cheerful, about the end of the world, and it's an ecological story about it's based on, I won't go into too much detail, but basically trees talk to each other, and they discover that as an absolute fact. It happens. It's done through a fungal network called mycelia. They join the roots together and they can communicate with each other. That's a fact. That's true. I heard it on Radio 4, so it must be. And and I thought, well, what if they really are a lot smarter than we give them credit for? And what if they don't like what we're doing to the atmosphere of the planet? And what if there was something they could do about it? And that was kind of the basis of the story. And what did you ask me again? See, I'm good thing this is a job interview, isn't it?
Well, you doing pretty well, but I mean, like you said before, obviously your books are set in sort of the real world, and I think definitely for Empress of the Trees, you could sort of argue that it's sort of almost bordered onto that sort of urban fantasy.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
But what I would say is very much they are grounded still in reality, in the sense of you haven't got like people with laser beams and superpowers sort of running around. It's not that kind of fantasy. Right. It's more like. I just need to write a note: remove laser beams from chapter 17. Basically, it's set in reality, but it's got a fantastical sort of scenario that everybody has to deal with. And I think you're very good at sort of drawing the characters and bringing out humanity in the characters. And I think that sort of more of extreme situation is very good at sort of bringing that out. It's absolutely the characters that make it work for me. As I say, that's what we were talking about. Things. So there was. It's happened in all of my books so far, apart from English Hikomori, which had a very, very. I knew the structure of that before I started, but there have been occasions in both of these books where things have happened, which weren't in the plan, and initially caused me a headache. But what I've found on both occasions is my way out of that headache has actually created a better story. There's in Still Life, it's basically about the two main characters at the beginning are at the end of a failing relationship, and that was part of the story. They had to kind of not be together when something happens later in the book, and then the rotters got back together. It's like, no, you can't do that. You're not supposed to like each other. What are you doing? And it created me a massive headache. So I had to think of another reason for them to not be together. And it's my favourite. I can't say what it is. I think I've told you. It's my favourite bit in the book, because I'm hoping when somebody reads it, they'll read that bit and go, oh shit. And I love stuff like that. Something similar happened in Empress of the Trees. Again, I had it was two characters that were not even meant to be, or they're not an item, but there's an attraction which wasn't meant to be there, which then created a subplot which has turned out to be my favourite subplot in the book again. So when you do your writing, are you aware that it's going to be read? Are you aware of the readers, or are you just so engrossed by the characters in the world that you just let yourself get carried away by it? That one. Yeah. Definitely. So you're not thinking, I'll put this bit in because that will shock the reader. Or you're thinking, I'll just let the characters. I like that. Any good book, I mean, obviously I don't have to tell you this, but any good book has twists and turns, has things happening in it which are unexpected. That's just the skill of writing. So no, I don't think I put them in there because I think it would surprise me if I was reading it. I suppose that's the closest I would get to empathising with what a reader might be going through. I mean, like with the English Hikomori,
if you actually describe, not an awful lot happens in it, realistically. It's basically about a person sitting by himself in a room getting more and more miserable. But you have to empathise with
than that, but yeah.
Sorry?
It's more to it than that, but yeah, I'm not going to give it away.
That's the bottom line, what it is. And it works. If it works for one reason. You care about what happens to that character. If you don't, then the whole thing's a complete waste of time. And I think that's true for a lot of books. I think that's true for everything I've written since. You know, as much as the situations are fantastical and not realistic, I'm more interested in my characters and how the situations impact on them. You know, my main character in Empress of the Trees is an 18-year-old girl who discovers that her parents are not her parents, and actually she was created for a very, very specific purpose. But you don't know that. At the beginning of the book, she's happy at home. She's, you know, it's her 18th birthday. She knows she's adopted because her dad doesn't lock the drawers in his office. And so her parents are working up to telling her, love, we should have told you this years ago. But you know, actually, we're not your real parents. And they work themselves up into this absolute lather about telling her. She's going, oh yeah, I know, dad left his drawer unlocked. and so I think she's a very well-rounded character. We shall see. Freddie was easy to write for because he was kind of, in a way, he was me. Whereas my lead characters in the other two books are both female, and I'm not quite sure. I hope I've got it right. This is why I'm so interested in your feedback of Still Life when I've finished the second draft, is I don't know. In fact, nearly all the characters in Still Life ended up being female, which wasn't a decision. It's not something I deliberately did. It just it's just how it played out. I think there are 3 or 4 characters in it that are male, and 2 of them are like bit parts. So,
so when you have an idea for a book, what is then your process for turning that idea into a manuscript?
Oh dear, that's so with English Hikomori, I literally wrote down I'd written down the broad structure before I even. I knew I'd been thinking about it for years. So yes. When it came to Empress of the Trees, I knew roughly what I wanted to happen at the beginning. I knew what I needed to happen at the end, but I deliberately left the middle bit kind of grey so it could evolve on its own. And what I tend to do is most of my books are in sort of almost episodes. So Hikomori is in kind of 2 episodes, really. Although originally I wrote it in 4, but that made no sense at all. And I came up with really pretentious titles for each episode, but they went in the editing process. And then I will usually, the quarter I'm writing, I will have a chapter breakdown, which is very, very detailed. It's basically scene for scene what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And then I have notes for the later bits of the story, which get filled out the closer I get to them. So I'm usually about a quarter of a book ahead in terms of detailed plan. But then they always change. My biggest problem with Empress of the Trees was my final quarter was terrible. It kind of was building up to this event, and then I didn't really know how to end it. And I have figured that out now, which is one of the reasons why hopefully this month I'm going to do a bit more work on that. It had characters going back and forth for no good reason. I suddenly thought, well, hang on, this is where the climax is set, and I've got them going there. Why haven't I go back to somewhere else and then come back? Why not just bring the timeline forward and just make things happen where they are. So I work in. I don't do what you do because you have a very specific. You know who your murderer is. And why they did it and all that at the beginning. Although, is it true there is a crime writer out there who doesn't know when he writes? Is that true?
Possibly. There's some crime writers who are called, or what they call pantsers. They'll just write as, not make it up, but they all sort of plan as they go along rather than actually doing the full detailed plot plan. I couldn't do that. I
don't see how anybody writing your genre of book actually could. It just makes no sense to me. But
There's a lot of editing afterwards. But it's because you've got to make sure you put the clues in. You've got to sort of lead your reader from the point of the murder around the garden, different garden paths, and then back down to the end gate where the solution is. So that's quite difficult to do. But anyway, getting back to your books. So with your characters, I would say Freddie's basically you, but is there any other characters who you would say based on other people, or do you think they're sort of people that you based upon characters you've seen in TV shows, or?
That's a really good question. I hadn't given that thought. What I do tend to do is I in my head it's a movie, and I cast it.
Yeah.
So do you do that?
Yes.
You do. Oh, who plays Dr. Weeks?
I can't say that.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Well, so
Jerome, for me, Jerome Flynn plays Conway.
Is that the one that was in Game of Thrones, or was that the other one?
That was Game of Thrones, yeah.
Oh no, that's fine. If it was the other one, I would have probably brought up my breakfast that I didn't have. But good choice. I can see that actually. So in Empress of the Trees, I've got this kind of I can't remember the actor's name, so no point bringing that up. But I've got this old Scottish guy who is he's basically a character who is he was created by the trees to fulfill a specific function. But because he's lived a very long time, these people, these creations of the trees can live up 3 or 4 times longer than a normal human being. And he got married and fell in love. And when his wife died, part of the things the trees do is kind of level out your emotions and take that away from you. And he kind of consciously decided, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to lose my memories of her. I don't want to have that smoothed out. I want it to be raw. I want to remember that I loved her. I want to remember how much it hurt when she died. The problem is that he ends up as a bit of a drunk and is totally incapable of doing what he's meant to do. And one of the things he's meant to do is mentor a future ambassador. And he doesn't. So this poor kid has an absolutely crappy life, and it's all this guy's fault because he wouldn't do what he was meant to do to smooth out the emotions, and he finally kind of realizes he's done a bad thing and submits himself to the trees and gets this kind of reset, and then literally becomes a different character. He's strong, he's forthright. So in my head I needed an actor that could play a bit of a drunken idiot, but then when it turns round, play someone with absolute authority who you would respect. So it's obviously Peter Capaldi.
What I tend to do in my characters is if I'm sort of trying to think of a new character, I might do a Google image search and find an image which fits how I picture the character in my head.
Right.
So that's what I did with Dr. Weeks. So I do a picture that I would say sort of fits with what he looks like. Obviously, they're never going to be released. But
I just want to show you something. I'm just showing you my iTunes podcast feed. There we go. So, although it didn't come out exactly when we said it would, the podcast is now live on iTunes. Let me just check Spotify whilst I'm here. Sorry, this is a total interruption of what you were saying, but
that's all right. We've got some comments as well. I haven't read I've got some comments as well in the chat, I think.
Have we?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, hang on. I've come off it to look at that. Oh, this is so rude of me. Hype. I don't know which bit we were talking about when that was said.
That's when the podcast was launched.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, so it is there now. I can see it on Spotify. I can see it on iTunes. It's going to be there on all the others. So
yeah.
So that's good news. So if somebody's listening to it, they might be quite close to finding out the title of Book 5. Now, this is away from talking about me. So you're not going to reveal the title in anything you've released until next month. Is that right?
Yeah, I will reveal the cover as well next month.
Yes. Excellent.
Which I have an idea for the cover image already, so I need to get my artist to get onto that. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, no, I'm hoping people enjoy it. I'm hoping we get some reactions. Somebody's already written a review on iTunes, but it was me, so I don't suppose that counts.
So you said you finished book 4, didn't you, yesterday?
I finished book 4 and I've started reading book 5, yeah. I really, again, I enjoyed the mystery, but I enjoyed the background shenanigans. I enjoyed the Inspector Lee and Wolf and the Miss Trent bit as I say, because it's really the characters in the society that I'm invested in, which is the reason I enjoy reading it. So if you did a book that had no mystery in it, but was all about something that happened within the society, I'd probably enjoy it. Obviously, that's not the point of what you write and why. But, I find the characters so interesting, and the longer it goes on, you just you realise there are going to be consequences and things are going to happen. I mean, I don't know, but at some point, I'm guessing Chief Inspector Jones, somebody's going to put two and two together about his role. And good poker face. And I'm really looking forward to that moment. I'm guessing that'll be around about book 9. I'm just guessing. But I think that's going to be an absolutely fascinating, just to watch the heads roll and people cover their arses and all that kind of stuff. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. So, yeah, I think I really do like the series. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next.
So, in book 4, was the murderer who you thought it was going to be? Could you figure out? That's always my biggest question. Could you figure out who the murderer was?
I didn't. But what I tend to find is when I read them quickly, I don't pick it up. Whereas with book 2, I was giving you feedback on it. So I read each chapter, absorbed it, made notes, and I did work out what was going on in book 2 before it was revealed. Not to the point where it spoilt the story for me, because I think that, as you say, the whole point of a murder mystery is there are clues there, so people can figure it out for themselves, and I did. But no, I didn't. The only thing I kind of realised was that it was probably... I almost wondered at one point if somebody was setting somebody else up, or I wasn't sure. So no, it did come as a bit of a surprise. I did, again, I don't want to name names. The person, the female involved in it, I did wonder if the kleptomania might be part of it. So I kind of figured that out. That perhaps that's how the offending poison got into the oil, but I didn't figure out who the other person was. I almost wondered if it was her husband, actually, if they were in it together. But no, so I didn't work that out. Oh, I'm gonna have to plug my computer in because my battery's running low, which means we're gonna have to move around. Hang on a second. Can you still see me all right?
I can still hear you, yeah.
I'm just trying to, hang on, I need to get my cable. I've got 5% warning, which means,
quick!
Oh, there we go. We're safe, as long as it goes.
And what did you think of how the Mr. Maxwell bit ended in book 4?
I really wanted him to not marry her. Because it just... And also there was a bit, you almost thought, oh my God, he's grown a pair. For a moment you...
When he said, he interrupts the guy when he's, anybody just like, speak now or better hold your peace.
Yeah, you're going to do this, and then he doesn't, and you just think, oh, you silly, silly sod. Because he's kind of sort of got himself into a ridiculous situation now, because he's married someone who... Oh, what did you describe her as? She looked like a giant snowflake or something in a wedding dress.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm assuming that was kind of from his point of view. So it was not the description of someone who was enamoured with his wife or wife to be in the next few minutes. So he's not going to be happy. We also know now that Georgina actually really likes him. So she's not going to be happy. And also, just because of the way he did things, I thought it was quite sad that the church was half empty, whereas if he'd been marrying a different person, there would have been a lot more people there. So, yeah, I think because of something you'd said, I knew that was how it was going to play out, that they were going to get married. But I was really, really hoping that he wouldn't. But then, as I say, knowing what I know about book 5, the title of which is available on the Bow Street Society podcast, which is now available to download on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and quite a few others. It is. I'm downloading it now. You will know the title of the 5th book, and the 5th book really ties into some of the things we've been talking about storyline-wise, and as you say, has been building up and building up. When they touched hands in book 1, did that play into what you were planning for book 5, or was that sort of...
So book 5 evolved really from, I would say, was it book 3 where, book 3 with his conversation with Dad.
Right. Yes, Dad, what a lovely man.
Oliver, yeah.
Yeah.
Such a bastard.
He is not the nicest person I've... But then that's the other thing. You enjoy disliking... If a character's well written, you won't just dislike them, you'll actively enjoy disliking them. And that's definitely the case with Oliver Maxwell. You don't sit there... You sit there thinking, what a bastard. What's he going to do What's he going to do next? How is he going to be horrible to his son again? Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to ask me, or should we think about wrapping this up?
What's your next project?
I don't know is the honest answer. So still life. I like to start my new projects in November and have that initial writing push through NaNoWriMo. That's what I've done for the last 3 years. However, last year I had no ideas. Literally 2 weeks before November, I'd kind of decided not to take part. And I don't know where still life came from, but somewhere between like me deciding I'm not going to bother, this idea came to me. I don't know how or why. And I actually did a live stream about my ideas a couple of days before November started. Yeah. And watching it back now, it's very, very woolly compared to what it ended up as. So I honestly don't know. I have got ideas. So Still Life is begging a follow-on. I've kind of written myself into a bit of not into a hole, but there are certain things that people will expect to happen and I don't think they necessarily should. So, for example, I've got a female character who has magical abilities, but is also very, 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 very angry about the things that have happened. And it would be very, very easy for her to go all Willow on us.
Yeah.
To go all Willow from Buffy, for people who aren't familiar, and I don't really want that to happen because that's too obvious. I think there will be some kind of there has to be some kind of outpouring because of everything that's happened, but it isn't going to be she's going to go Willow Rosenberg on us because that's been done before. But I think people will be expecting that because there's a bit towards the end which. But anyway, so yes, that's one possibility. Sequel, follow on from that. I really want to know what happens to Freddie and Lauren next, because it's a very one-sided story, and you sit there thinking, "Oh, Freddie's been through the mill, hasn't he?" But as you read it, you begin to realise that Lauren has as well, and I kind of want to tell her story because she, whilst helping Freddie and all that, she was actually in an abusive relationship, which Freddie is aware of, but he's too kind of caught up in his own misery to really do anything about. And she ends up saving his life by fighting back at her abuser, which is probably less of a powerful moment than it should have been because you don't really have the background. So I want to explore Lauren and her relationship more.
Would you consider sort of, not necessarily rewrite, would you consider doing a version of first book but from her point of view, so the same events but have it from her point of view?
I did think that. Problem is, you know what's going to happen, so I think
but obviously that you know what happens to Freddie, but you don't really necessarily know what's happening to Lauren in between those events.
No, but you know how it ends. You know she finally gets away from him. So I did consider that, but I just didn't think it would work that well. But I did think maybe exploring what happens next, but making it a Lauren-centric, because you read the book, and what do you want to happen at the end? Obviously, apart from what do you want to happen next if you were the reader?
What, to Freddie and Lauren?
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily want them to get together yet. I think eventually I'd want to get together, but I think at the moment they neither of them in the right place to be able to have a decent relationship. But I would like to know more about what happens to her and how she moves on from that abusive relationship and having to now redefine herself and rediscover herself.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I have considered doing is following up as I say, with a what happened next story, and I've got various titles for it. I was thinking of so it's set the year before the pandemic, and I kind of, because I don't like giving my characters an easy time. Freddie spends a year by himself, out of choice, kind of locked up in his home, unable to do anything. How awful, bless him, would it be if, when he's finally ready to kind of start going out and start seeing the world again, being told, thanks to a pandemic, you're not allowed to leave your house. So one of the ideas I had in my head was calling it the reluctant Hikomori, because he's now wants to go out and do stuff but can't. But then that's kind of putting the emphasis too much on him, and I really say it kind of needs to be Lauren's story. I then considered calling it Broken People, because I want to... There are four main... Although some of them don't do very much, there are kind of four main characters in the English Hikomori. So you've got Freddie, you've got Lauren, you've got Kaz, the Japanese guy who he never actually meets in real life, but has clearly had his own issues. And then there's Jake, the one whose boyfriend has just died, who's in an absolutely crap place as well. So I thought sticking those four characters in a house where they're not allowed to separate because of the rules, because of the pandemic, might be quite interesting. But it might be a bit depressing as well. I don't know.
Very some dramatic. Well, they're a version of Big Bob, then, is it, basically?
Yeah, So I don't know. I like all of the characters. I mean, for me, Jake as a character is a bit unsung, but it's actually him that knew how to press Freddie's buttons at the end to get him to talk.
Yeah.
And it's a very brief moment, but because it's effectively the epilogue of the story, but Freddie's clamming up and still won't talk to anybody after surviving his suicide attempt. And it's Jake. It's not Lauren who's been in love with him or whatever for such a long time. It isn't Lauren that knows how to break him out of that. It's Jake. It's one of his best mates who just knows what to say to piss Freddie off, to get a reaction out of him. So I do think he's almost an unsung, I don't know about hero, but there's more of a character there than I think comes across. So I'd like to explore him more as well. So I don't know is the honest. I don't know what I'm going to write next.
What are you going to do with the book?
The first book. So
you're going to read it.
Sorry.
When are people going to be able to read it?
I don't know. I mean, I'm finishing it off, reading through it. Certainly, everything I read today, there's nothing I wanted to change. Hopefully, the rest of it is in that kind of condition, so I can effectively sign it off as a finished work. And then I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about publishing it myself, because of your experience, actually. Because one of the bits of feedback you got when you sent... Am I right to say this?
Yeah. Nobody actually said that to me. It was just the impression I got, possibly.
Okay. I thought you'd actually...
Nobody actually specifically said it to me.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that it had been published previously, I think to a degree goes against it.
Yeah.
So also, I do feel because it is so different to the normal sort of accepted standards of the genre. Again, that also goes against it a little bit. But that's my story. That's not yours.
So my current plan is to effectively finish it off, which hopefully I'll do in the next month or two. And then I am going to, if I can afford it, if I ever work again, buy the, what's that book known as? The which one?
Writers and Writers Yearbook.
That one, buy that. And then basically get my cover letter and my synopsis sorted and start sending it out to people, because like you say, it's not gonna do anything sitting in a drawer or on a hard drive. And my guess is it's going to be too dark for anybody to want to publish, but I'm not going to know that. Somebody might go...
No, you won't. No, you need to just take that plunge.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So that is my intention, is to actually...
Good. Hold you to that one.
Oh, you're going to help me write. You're going to help me write the cover letter.
I am.
If that's all right.
Fine, yeah.
So I don't intend to do nothing with it, but I'm worried about self-publishing it, at least for now, because
I think you should explore. Because when I wrote The Curious Client, I knew it was going to be self-published when I was buying it. I wasn't even going to consider sending it to somewhere else.
Right.
Because I want to have the control over the brand and control over the marketing and everything. But I think we'll say Jura, I think it's worth you send it off to agents and things first and see how that goes.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I absolutely do intend to do that. Okay, I'm gonna call it a day there. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for answering my questions as well. I'm sure there's burning questions about your writing.
Oh, I'm sure loads of people have loads of questions. So thank you very much. I've done some special end credits. Yeah, it was very exciting. Don't go. I'll have a little chat with you once we're off. But thank you. This will also be available. I think I'm going to send you a copy of this. I might not be able to actually because it's going to be bloody enormous. So we'll have to find a way of getting.
We could just always cut it down so you can just when we start, or just you can edit it as much as you want basically. Because I'll just do a kind of brief version on. But obviously, make sure you still include your questions at the end. Don't be editing them out.
Tani, thank you so much, and good luck with the podcast and book 5.
Thank you.
Bye bye.